Thank you. So when I studied international relations in school and taught it as a professor, I can't say that urbanization, urban problems, urban poverty was on the agenda. That's changed. As we at the State Department look out at 21st century challenges, we see the problems of the world's cities as critical to the problems of the world's countries and to the global challenges we all face. Addressing those problems is a key element of what we think of as 21st century diplomacy. And I could not be more delighted to have a chance to engage in a discussion and to hear from you and to give you a sense of what we're thinking at the State Department. Before I go on, I do want to thank Judith Rodin, who has been a role model for me, first as a tremendously successful woman president, the first woman president of an Ivy League school at the University of Pennsylvania, and now with her brilliant leadership of the Rockefeller Foundation. I want to thank the United Nations, and particularly UN Undersecretary General and Director of UN Habitat, Ana Tibaijuka, who is here and is the highest-ranking African woman in the UN system, another role model. And thanks also to HUD Secretary Sean Donovan for his leadership on these issues, and also for his extraordinary work in New York City as a Princetonian, a nearby state, before joining the administration. You've been hearing all day about the challenges of urbanization. I will add just a few numbers. When we look at this from the State Department policy planning perspective, we see not only 837 million people who are currently living in urban slums, but as we project it, in the next 30 years, more than 2.1 billion people will be born into urban poverty. I watched this weekend Slumdog Millionaire for the first time with my children. It made a huge impact on them. If we think about that over the next 30 years, that is Slumdog Millionaire on steroids. It is a vision that we have to stop. Over 90% of the world's population growth in the coming 2 decades, as currently projected, will occur in developing cities, and most of that in slums. When we look at those problems, what we see is tremendously complex, interconnected issues. Air pollution, clean water shortages, depletion of natural resources, deeply entrenched unemployment, widened income disparities, crime rates, legal impunity, and the increased spread of disease. When we think about those urban problems as a development challenge, we turn first to the UN Millennium Development Goals. The leaders in the UN committed to significantly improving the lives of 100 million slum dwellers by 2020. If we use as a proxy indicator for success on that goals improved drinking water supplies, we have made real progress. But we have an enormous way to go, particularly in Africa and Southwest Asia. These issues, these continuing problems, are very plain to see. I had the privilege of traveling with Secretary Clinton to Mumbai this summer. We did see much of the new Mumbai. We saw the shining buildings. We saw the top business elite of India. We saw the growth and the development and the pride in Mumbai and in India more generally that is taking place. But we also saw plenty of devastation, of tremendous entrenched poverty, and of terrible slums right next to some of those buildings we were driving by. Again, if we think about tackling those challenges, it has to be urban infrastructure, housing, water, sanitation, clean air activities, and a whole set of investments that will spur both municipal and microfinance, job creation, bolstering neighborhood security, and improving local governance. At the same time, we have to link tackling those problems in the cities to effective rural economic growth. We spent time at an agricultural station in the country. That part of solving urban problems is as critical as anything we do in the cities. It's not uncommon to think of urban problems as a development challenge. What is new, I think, in this administration is that we also see it as a diplomacy challenge. It is not just for AID, it is equally for our diplomats in the State Department. Urbanization has powerful political effects. It realigns domestic interest groups. I don't need to tell anyone that who's worked in big American cities. People become more concentrated. They demand different services from their government. On the diplomatic side, we need to be able to deal with those changes in the way states calculate their interests. And in some countries, the youth bulge that is concentrated in cities turns into high unemployment rates, which translates into vulnerability to radicalization. So when we think of our counter-radicalization policies, we also need to be thinking of our urban policies and our youth strategies. Failure to manage the growth of cities in developing countries can lead to increased political and military and civil conflict, which is a key global security problem. So we need to address this challenge equally from the diplomatic and the development side. We have been working in this area for many decades, mostly through USAID. Through the Making Cities Work program, USAID has devoted tremendous resources to the challenges of urbanization. Making Cities Work has partnered with the Cities Alliance, which has brought together a consortium of 10 bilateral donors, 3 multilateral development agencies, and 4 international cities associations. When Valerie Jarrett was talking about the partnership of the public sector, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, this is exactly an example of that kind of consortium. Cities Alliance has brought more than $30 million in seed money to help in slum upgrading, regulatory framework improvement, and infrastructure development. Kigali, Rwanda, has established an Office of Economic Development to promote local economic improvement. La Paz, Bolivia, has established a disaster mitigation program. From the Millennium Challenge Corporation, we've brought attention to the links between land titling, land insecurity, and the lack of secure shelter for citizens across the developing world. State and USAID are also implementing the 2005 Paul Simon Water for the Poor Act, which has made access to safe water and sanitation for developing countries a specific policy objective of all of our foreign assistance programs. This morning I was talking to Undersecretary Maria Otero, who is our Undersecretary for Democracy and Global Affairs. She is committed to making access to clean water one of the signatures of her time in office as Undersecretary for Global Affairs. We have done significant work on the development side. We are beginning to do more work on the diplomacy side. But Secretary Clinton is determined to elevate the role of development and integrate it with our diplomatic approaches as the hallmark of our foreign policy. She has launched a process to look at how we use foreign assistance and how we use our diplomacy to facilitate and to improve our ability to implement foreign assistance. She seeks to figure out how diplomacy and development need to adapt together to 21st century challenges like urbanization. Closely coordinating the diplomatic side and the development side also involves a whole-of-government approach to these problems. It's one reason I'm delighted to be here tonight, with Secretary Donovan, as an example of how state will work with more traditional domestic agencies to make a difference on these problems. Part of our strategy will also be exactly to empower local actors, as Valerie Jarrett said, to tap into the knowledge and the creativity of the people living in these cities, not to tell them what to do, but to learn from them what has worked, what they think will work, and to build that into our policy. Working on public-private partnerships, Secretary Clinton established a new Office of Global Partnership Initiatives, working to reach out to the private sector and to the nonprofit sector, not as foot soldiers in our diplomatic approaches, but as coalition partners, and indeed to provide the jump start, the seed money, some of the political facilitation to allow those coalitions to work on their own. Also leveraging the impact of what we call connection technologies. The urban poor can benefit from mobile telephony, from shared computer platforms, social networking, just as the rural poor have been leapfrogging past traditional grid approaches. There are an entire range of connection technologies and the ways we can connect the poor to each other and to knowledge that we are just beginning to explore. The United States also needs to leverage our own connections. As a country, we are in more places and we are more connected in more ways through more parts of our society than any other country. As we think about our diplomacy and our development, we need to think about leveraging those connections, about convening, connecting, catalyzing, mobilizing as a part of what we mean by global leadership. And finally, empowering women and girls. The multiplier effect of investing in women and girls' work in the countryside and in urban environments. There are few dollars better spent. So, as I am now between you and your dinner, let me just say it is an honor to represent the State Department and to say that we take the urbanization challenge as seriously globally as our counterparts in the government take urban problems in the United States. We look forward to working with HUD, with AID, and with all the other domestic agencies who have a piece of urban problems. And we look forward to public-private partnerships with the Rockefeller Foundation and other philanthropic organizations. We are also particularly looking forward to working at the World Urban Forum in Rio de Janeiro. And I personally am looking forward to bringing together many of the minds in this government, in the UN, and in the private sector together as we think about how to tackle these problems much more comprehensively in the 21st century. Finally, I want to thank UN Habitat for such a spectacular celebration in such a spectacular setting of World Habitat Day. And again, to affirm my pride that this is happening here in Washington in this administration. Now let's go forward and do the hard work of getting it done. Thank you.